What is up, my Planet Coaster friends? Johnny5 Alive here, and we are back with another episode of Yeti Land. In this episode, we're going to be doing a lot of terrain sculpting. We're getting the last of our terrain figured out, and we're going to do a little bit with the train. We're going to be doing a little bit with the lights and colors, a little bit with water, and yeah, it's basically all terrain. As you can see here, I'm trying to sculpt out some stuff around Frank's feet. So, stay tuned and let's check it out. Alright, so let's just dive into it. In the last two episodes, this is all recordings from the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So episodes 6 and 7 were all, and this 8 were all done on the weekend. And I am completely out of footage as in the time of making this recording. I have no more footage. So what you see at the end of this episode is where we are currently, and then I will start working on it some more. However, I am very happy with where we're standing after this episode because it leaves us with pretty much just the fun stuff. We can start doing our war. We could do a little bit. The only like chores I'd have to say that we have to do are we're gonna have to do 2 let's builds for 2 other train stations. So we got to get those out of the way, and I've talked about that in the last 2 episodes. And then after that, we can just pretty much do whatever we want. We can start really building and coming up with some cool stuff. So I'm looking forward to that, and I feel really good now that I'm feeling really good about where we stand after this video. So here you can see I'm trying to make like footprints. I wasn't 100% happy with the way this turned out, but it wasn't bad, and maybe I could have spaced them a little bit better. Maybe I could have put a little bit more thought into it. And it kind of sucks that it was so close to the end of the map because it's just 4 footprints. But nonetheless, it works. And I ended up making them too small, so you end up seeing me like do a bunch of work to this and then undo it or make it bigger, kind of mess it up. But because we're at 6 times speed, it doesn't matter. And I was just experimenting at this point, like maybe the snow melted underneath the footprints or something like that. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should go put ice in there. Like he stomped on it so hard that the snow compacted into ice. That might be actually a better idea. It's just coming to mind now. So I might actually go back and try that out and see how that looks. Everything's always an experimentation process, and I probably should have looked at it closer before I did that because the feet were too small. Either way, it's just there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just kind of tells the story a bit, and someone gave the suggestion of putting the footprints down and putting a little bit of water in it, like they melted, or as if his feet have such big impact that he kind of went into the icy water layer. I had a thought come to my mind just a second ago, but I lost it. That's the thing about doing these things live like this while you're trying to keep up with yourself. Your brain kind of tends to go all over the place. Nonetheless, you guys seem to enjoy it, and I'm pretty relaxed while I'm doing these ones, so it's fun. So here we are, we're just trying to sculpt out the rest of our terrain. So I was thinking about things like our train station over there. Oh, I remembered my thought. Okay, I got to go to it while I still remember. The map was, the Arctic map size was increased in one of the recent patches. So the map was actually smaller than the rest of the maps if you went and played on the Arctic biome. And I was feeling that way when I started Yeti Land. I was like, why does this feel so easy? Because like, I remember playing around with a fresh map before and go, oh my god, I have a lot of sculpting to do in order to fill this map to its full potential. And it seemed to like come a long way quickly with the Arctic map, and I had a feeling that the map was smaller. And my feeling was confirmed when I saw the patch notes saying that they increased the size. And I was looking at this during this episode. Excuse me. I was looking at this during this episode and looking at the borders. I might have done this off camera, but the map is actually like 4 times bigger than it used to be. There's this huge border that I can see outside my border that I have no access to. I literally cannot build there. And it's good and it's bad because you can see where my train is. It's on the edge of this map. There's a whole new border that they added in, like freaking 100 meters all around the edges. And it makes the map literally like 4 times bigger if you had access to it. I don't know if I can save the map off and bring it into the bigger map, but even if I could do that, it wouldn't be very good for us at this point because we've already defined our layout, and having more land like that just it makes things problematic. We have way more work to do. So I'm a little bit bummed out that we're stuck on this small map, but at the same time, it's actually a good thing because sometimes less is more, and those big giant parks, if you fill them up corner to corner, they run at way below 30 frames a second if you get 5,000 people in the park. So I think our park, our scenario map, and anyone who builds parks on this scenario map will have like a really decent park. You're going to have a good amount of rides, you're going to have a good amount of coasters, and you're going to have a good looking park at the end of the day, and it's not going to be laggy. So I think what we're left with at the end of the day on this small map is just enough, and you don't need to go that crazy. So I am fine with it, and it's also going to allow us to get on with life a little bit faster because there's a lot of plans that I have in the pipeline for after Yeti Land, and I didn't think Yeti Land would take this long, but we're constantly doing a lot of different things with a lot of different series on this channel that are taking up a majority of my time. And the only reason this is taking so long is because I've only really worked on Yeti Land for like a combination of like 3 full days. So like if I just took the next 3 days off, I could recreate this whole map in that time. And just the editing process, getting everything out to you guys, and also keeping up with those other series is the reason why this takes so long. I mean, I played a little bit on the weekend, and I was able to crank out like 3 full episodes, and we're doing things at 6 times speed. So what you guys see in a half an hour is actually like 6 hours of work or something. I don't exactly know, but the recordings are all different lengths, and I just kind of try and clip it down to about a half an hour, and just there you go. So yeah, having said all that, I think Yeti Land is just enough. It's just right. And that flat side of the map there, I wanted more character to it. I wanted to add a little bit more depth in the design of the landscape. So that's what you see me doing here is I'm bringing out like more plateau kind of like elevated pieces like we had on the other side, so that we'll actually have room to build rides, buildings, villages. And as I've mentioned in previous episodes, this side of the map is going to be in being pillaged and in war. There's war times happening between the Yetis, the snowmen, and the gingerbread men. So we need a place to build all these houses and buildings, and I felt like maybe if I sculpted out an area, it would give me a better understanding of a layout, because what we had before this episode was just a flat area, and it's like, well, do I just put some houses down and a path, and then hopefully it starts coming together? But now that we have some landscape, we can see narrow areas, wider areas, and things like that. And we have that little area there with the water, so we can have some bridges going across. And now the landscape sort of dictates what our village is going to look like. So that big open area, we're going to have a lot more buildings, and we're going to have a lot more havoc and chaos, and it'll be the bigger destruction areas. And where it goes narrow a little bit, that's just where it's going to have like a couple rows of shops and a main street going down. And that's going to really help us guide the layout of the village, and we can start working with that and coming up with ideas along the way. And now that I have terrain there, I can really start thinking creatively and figuring out, what am I going to do with this? Sometimes when you just have a flat area, it's hard to envision what it's going to look like. And now I think this kind of helps us be creative within constraints. So as kind of a word of advice or a tip here, try to give yourself constraints. Like if someone said, I want you to create anything, you could likely run into a mental block. But if someone said, I want you to create a western park on the desert biome, and I want you to do it in a canyon, from there you have constraints, and you're like, okay, well, how deep is this canyon? How many bridges am I going to have? And then you're like, where am I going to put my town? Is it at the top of the canyon or is it at the bottom of the canyon? What kind of train and rides am I going to have on the edges of this canyon? And that, from there, you can really start thinking of ideas because you had a starting point. So I always say, try and give yourself like a ballpark constraints, and then be creative within that, and you will find yourself being much more creative. So with Yeti Land, I was like, snow map. What do I do on a snow map? And I was lost. And then I was like, just sitting there with the terrain tools, like I could probably make a Yeti out of these terrain tools. And then I made the Yeti. And then I started conceiving the idea of Yeti Land. And then we made a big Yeti cave, and then the mama Yeti. And I started getting ideas of the baby Yetis. And it all started from, it started from the hard spot of what do I do with this? And then the Yeti kind of, that's where our constraints are. We're doing things that are all Yeti based, and then we start adding touches of other themes in here and there. But we're building within constraints. We're trying to make a festive gingerbread town, a destroyed one, a war, and that's the whole story. There is a sci-fi section, but they're using their technology to build a fence to keep the Yetis out. So again, we're building within these constraints, and we're making the sci-fi work in terms of they're using technology to protect the people, the actual guests of the park, from the Yetis themselves. They're keeping the Yetis out at bay. So it tells a story, and it is all within constraints. I'm not going to start doing crazy things like, carving giant dragons out of terrain and stuff, and using purple and pink lights and stuff like that. Everything's icy. We're using blue lights only, different colored blue lights, white lights, but we're keeping everything magically icy and a frosty kingdom of the Yeti Land. So while I do have ideas and I want to use different lights and I want to do different things, I'm building within those constraints. So you saw me doing the lighting again on the nighttime scene. We wanted to make that whole plateau area light up. I'm really liking the look of that. It gives us this magical, cool feeling area. And then I wanted we're going to have a village up there, so I wanted a quick route from the Yeti cave to the village that we're going to be sacking. And so the Yetis took some of those trees, and they lined them up, they put some boards down, and they made themselves a quick access pathway to getting up to this village. And this is where they're going to be going up and down, carrying their loot that they've gotten from this village, all their candy, all the presents, everything that they're stealing. And I mentioned this in earlier episodes, the Yetis, nobody thinks about Yetis on Christmas, so they're fending for themselves. And so they're resourceful, and they want to celebrate the holidays. So nobody's bringing them presents, so they got to go take it. And that's the war between the snowmen and the gingerbread, or the snowmen and gingerbread versus the Yetis. And the humans are not involved. This is all for the guests. Nobody's getting hurt. We're just having fun and being playful. The guests get to walk around and experience this war zone without getting hurt. So it's all fun and dandy. Now, while we're making paths for the Yetis, this has nothing to do with the guests. The guests will not be using these paths. So we will have some sort of access point for the real visitors, the guests, to get up into that little town that we're building. And there we'll probably have some main paths going through the war zone so that they can kind of walk through and get a look at all the war happening. So this is kind of like a different side route for the Yetis only, and we're going to have that centerpiece with the island and the bridge going across. We're probably going to use that for the guests, as that's their entrance point. And and then we'll probably have one going down the center, and maybe even between the Papa Yeti legs. I don't know, I have to think about it still. So here I'm just building out our train, and you'll see me doing things like I could do 26-degree angles, and I mentioned this in the last video. There's something that's really funky that happens because they use it a 26-degree angle. If you turn it right on 26 degrees, you have to make sure you turn it left again on 26 degrees to get back to being straight. And if you turn right 2 or 3 times at 26 degrees, you're going to have to turn left 2 or 3 times at 26 degrees. Otherwise, your train is never going to be straight again. And I ran into this problem before, so you have to be very careful when doing train tracks and you want to run it to another station. And I was trying to avoid that, and I only want to use the 12.5 degrees because it helps avoid this problem. And I end up having to do it here, so I figured I'd just run it through this part here, make a cave, turn it 26 degrees again, and then I could get back to straight. And I think I got it to straight there, and I'm leaving it the way it is there. So you see that train station that I just put down? We're going to do a Let's Build series. It might even be a Let's Play, because Let's Builds are usually blueprints. So depending on whether or not, I'll know by the end of the episode, but depending on whether or not we make this a Let's Build, regardless, we're going to be making a Yeti train station. It's going to be built out of all these boards and stuff that you've been seeing me use, scaffold. It's going to be very primitive, and the Yetis have made some sort of train station, and they're going to all be hanging off of it. I mentioned this in one of the last episodes as well, but now you guys get to see where it is, and that's the platform. And now the train just kind of goes to nowhere. That's because I'm still unsure of what our last train station is going to be or where it's going to be. And I've hinted at the idea in the last couple episodes that I wanted to make an ice castle over there, because I just feel like that would be so fitting with all of our blue lights and, all the different themes we have going. It'd be nice to see some fantasy in here as well. And I think the ice castle would be very suitable. So I as I was doing this, and I looked inside the caves, I was thinking, it doesn't really make much sense that there's snow inside the cave, because the cave technically has a roof. It's covered, so the snow can't get in there. So I decided to go on a little tangent and start painting things and adding some extra heavy rock texture. We put some ground rock texture on the base. We're just leaving enough snow on the entrance, because if it's windy or whatever, the snow would blow deep into the cave, but then it would start dispersing a little bit and becoming very light. So we want some snow that was blown into the cave, but generally we want the inside of the cave to be rocky, or some sort of dirt or something like that. So we'll probably have rock and then dirt paths, and then it goes back into the snow. So I started going on this painting tangent, and I was like, I just want to play around with the paint a little bit, get everything looking nice. Like I mentioned in previous episodes, we're pretty much done with our terrain. I like the way things are looking, and it's all about doing some final adjustments here and there. So that's what you see me doing here, is just really doing some fine details on certain things, because I'm pretty confident that we won't be changing much, and even if we do make a few minor tweaks here and there, it won't be too hard to repaint things. So I'm just kind of removing the snow from inside the caves, adding rock, ice, different things like that, and really just kind of taking things to the next level. And then we're going to play around with some lights as well. And we did a little bit of that in the beginning of this episode, but I remember where I left off, I was lighting the edges of the water, and I thought that effect looked really good. And then I didn't quite finish it, and then my Sunday was pretty much over. So near the end of this episode, we're going to get around to putting some more lights in and illuminating the lake and the little rivers and stuff. And it gives us a pretty cool look. I like the way it's looking. It brings out that magical, icy feel that we're trying to bring to this map. And then when I get back to it next time I play, I'm probably going to finish doing those lights in the water. But then again, I might be changing just a little bit of the battlefield. Right now you can see all these Yetis are just spaced out on the floor. There's just a whole bunch of different Yetis, and I've put them there because that was the one flat spot, empty spot, and they're just there as basically blueprints for us to use later on and build Art of War. But where they're standing is pretty much the heart of where the armies are going to be marching at each other head on. Probably going to have some trees there and a forest and stuff. So I don't know if we're going to be changing the landscape too much there. So depending, I think the water is good the way it is. So I'm pretty confident with adding the rest of the lights in for the next episode. And then we're going to have to think about moving those Yetis, or, well, I don't know. I'm going to have to really think about it because we need them as our blueprints. So I guess we could move them over to Sci-Fi Land because we're not doing anything for Sci-Fi Land. We're leaving that blank because this is a scenario map, and we want people to have all these nice flat areas to get creative and build their park on. And when we play it as a Let's Play, we will be fulfilling the concept to its fullest. So we will have a sci-fi area built there. So I guess I could bring all the Yetis over to Sci-Fi Land and then start bringing over the ones for the war. And with that big flat area where they are now will ultimately become a war zone. So I think I'm good to move in with fitting in the rest of the glowy lights around the edges of the lake, so the whole thing kind of illuminates and lights up. I love the different colors of blue that we're getting here, the dark blue, the light blue, the snowy blue, the white, and I just think that looked really good and magical. It's obviously not realistic. I've mentioned this in other videos and other episodes, but we're going for out of this world. It's like supposed to be, mystical and magical. So nothing really needs to make sense. We just want it to be, we want to give it that wow factor, that mysterious factor. What is the world of the Yeti lands? And it tells its own story. So I like the blue lights. We've added it to the underbellies of the caves, the cliffs, and all that. So why not have it in the water as well? So it's cohesive and consistent throughout the map. So it's a lot of tedious work just mashing these all in. But like I said, luckily because we're on a small map, it doesn't matter how many lights we have, how many waterfalls, and how many trees and rocks. It seems to run solid. My frame rate's still at 60 FPS with all this junk in here. We got thousands of Yetis and a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, so anyways, that's it for the end of the recording, guys. It wasn't the craziest one. We got the end of our terrain in, so I'm happy with it. And in the next episode, we're going to be able to really start doing something fun. So I think for the next episode, we're going to finish those lights up, and then we're probably going to start destroying that gingerbread and having more fun with animating the Yetis, because I know you guys love those episodes. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like, please like, and if you're new, be sure to subscribe and let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. All right, guys, see you later.